Good morning and welcome to Bible in a Year. Today is day 39 of 365 days that we're going to be going through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and we're going to be learning the Holy Bible, the New International Version. This is the greatest love story ever told, a love story between God and his people. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz. We're going to be going through the adventure timeline created by Jeff Cavins. We are now in the period of Egypt and Exodus. Today we're going to be reading Exodus 21, Leviticus 14, and Psalm 75. Now, Exodus 21 speaks about when the Lord sets before Moses concerning the laws concerning the Hebrew servants, that you're only to hold them for 6 years. In the 7th year, you are to set them free. And then what happens if the master gives the servant a wife, and also what happens with female slaves. Also, he talks about the laws concerning personal injury, like what happens in the case of murder, accidental death, and lasting injuries, some bad, some good. And Leviticus 14, we'll talk about, yesterday actually, we spoke of how to spot skin disease and clothing mildew and the regulations surrounding that. And today we hear about the Jewish priest's role in these two things, what they do with skin disease and mildew, and how to cleanse each particular situation. And lastly, Psalm 75 we'll be talking about, which is a song of Asaph. I've spoken about who the people of Asaph are. Remember, they were some of the ones who were during when Moses came down from the mountain, and those who had praised idols, and the earth opened up and swallowed a whole bunch of the family of Asaph. But there was some remnant that stayed afterwards, and they were the ones who became the ones who took care of music and other things within the temple. And so this is a psalm of praise. So let's get started. Exodus chapter 21. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. But in the 7th year, he shall go free, without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him a son or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and my children, and do not want to go free, then the master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door, or to a doorpost, and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be a servant for life. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as men servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners, because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, that being food, clothing, marital rights, she is to go free without any payment of money. Anyone who strikes a man and kills him shall surely be put to death. However, if he doesn't do it intentionally, but God lets it happen, he is to flee to a place I've designated. But if a man schemes and kills another man deliberately, take him away from my altar and put him to death. Anyone who attacks his father or his mother must be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps another and either sells him or still has him when he is caught must be put to death. Anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. If men quarrel and one hits the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held responsible if the other gets up and walks away around outside with his staff. However, he must pay the injured man for the loss of his time and see that he is completely healed. If a man beats his male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies as a direct result, he must be punished. But he is not to be punished if the slave gets up after a day or two, since the slave is his property. If men who are fighting hit a pregnant woman and the woman gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is a serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If a man hits a manservant or maidservant in the eye and destroys it, he must let the servant go free to compensate for the eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of a manservant or maidservant, he must let the servant go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull must be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up and it kills a man or woman, the bull must be stoned and the owner also must be put to death. However, if payment is demanded of him, he may redeem his life by paying whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a man or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull must be stoned. If a man uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must pay for the loss. He must pay its owner, and the dead animal will be his. If a man's bull injures the bull of another, and it dies, they are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it is known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal, and the dead animal will be his. Here ends our first reading. Our second reading comes from Leviticus chapter 14. Cleansing for skin diseases. The Lord said to Moses, there are regulations for the diseased persons at the time of his ceremonial cleansing, when he is brought to the priest. The priest is to go outside the camp and examine him. If the person has been healed of his infectious skin disease, the priest shall order that 2 live, clean birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought for the one to be cleansed. Then the priest shall order that one of the birds be killed over fresh water in a clay pot. He is then to take the live bird and dip it, together with the cedar wood, the scarlet yarn, and the hyssop, into the blood of the bird that is killed over the fresh water. 7 times he shall sprinkle the one to be cleansed of the infectious disease and pronounce him clean. Then he is to release the live bird in the open fields. The person to be cleansed must wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and bathe with water. Then he will be ceremonially clean. After this he may come into the camp, but he must stay outside his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day he must shave off all of his hair. He must shave his head, his beard, his eyebrows, and the rest of his hair. He must wash his clothing and bathe himself with water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day he must bring 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb, a year old, each without defect, along with 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. The priest who pronounces him clean shall present both the one to be cleansed and his offering before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the priest is to take one of the male lambs and offer it as a guilt offering, along with the log of oil. He shall wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He is to slaughter the lamb in the holy place where the sin offering and the burnt offering are slaughtered. Like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then take some of the log of oil, pour it in the palm of his own left hand, dip his right forefinger into the oil in his palm, and with his finger sprinkle some of it before the Lord 7 times. The priest is to put some of the oil remaining in his palm on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, and make atonement for him before the Lord. Then the priest is to sacrifice a sin offering and make atonement for the one to be cleansed from his uncleanliness. After that, the priest shall slaughter the burnt offering offered on the altar, together with the grain offering, and make atonement for him, and he will be clean. If, however, he is poor and cannot afford these, he must take one male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved, to make atonement for him, together with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixture with oil for a grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, which he can afford, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. On the 8th day he must bring them from his cleansing to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting, before the Lord. The priest is to take the lamb for the guilt offering, together with the log of oil, and wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He shall slaughter the lamb for the guilt offering, and take some of its blood, put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot. The priest is to pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and with his right forefinger sprinkle some of the oil from his palm 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil in his palm he is to put on the same place he put the blood of the guilt offering, on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. Then he shall sacrifice the doves of the young pigeon, which the person can afford. One is a sin offering, and the other is a burnt offering, together with the grain offering. In this way the priest will make atonement for the Lord on behalf of the one to be cleansed. These are the regulations for anyone who has infectious skin diseases and who cannot afford the regular offerings for his cleansing. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "When you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as your possession, and I put a spreading mildew in a house in that land, the owner of the house must go and tell the priest, 'I've seen something that looks like mildew in my house.' The priest is to order the house to be emptied before he goes in to examine the mildew, so that nothing in the house will be pronounced unclean. After this, the priest is to go in and inspect the house. He is to examine the mildew on the walls, and if it is greenish or reddish depressions that appear to be deeper than the surface of the wall, the priest shall go out of the doorway of the house and close it up for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall return to inspect the house. If the mildew is spread on the walls, he is to order that the contaminated stone be torn out and thrown into an unclean place outside the town. He must have all the inside walls of the house scraped, and the material that is scraped off dumped into an unclean place outside the town. Then they are to take other stones to replace these, and take new clay and plaster the house. If the mildew reappears in the house after the stones have been torn out, and the house scraped and plastered, the priest is to go and examine it, and if the mildew is spread in the house, it is a destructive mildew. The house is unclean. It must be torn down, its stones, timbers, and all the plaster, and taken out of the town to an unclean place. Anyone who goes into the house while it is closed up, will be unclean till evening. Anyone who sleeps or eats in the house must wash his clothes. But if the priest comes to examine it, and the mildew has not spread after the house has been plastered, he shall pronounce the house clean, because the mildew is gone. To purify the house is to take 2 birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop. He shall kill one of the birds over fresh water in a clay pot. Then he is to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, and the live bird, dip them in the blood of the dead bird and fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. He shall purify the house with the bird's blood, the fresh water, the live bird, and the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet yarn. Then he is to release the live bird in the open field outside the town. In this way he will make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. These are the regulations for any skin disease, for an itch, for mildew in clothing, or in a house, and for swelling, a rash, a bright spot, to determine when something is clean or unclean. These are the regulations for infectious skin disease and mildew. Our last reading, Psalm 75, a psalm of praise. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks, for your name is near. Men tell of your wonderful deeds. You say, I choose the appointed time. It is I who judge uprightly. when the earth and all its people quake. It is I who holds its pillar firm. To the arrogant I say, boast no more, and to the wicked, do not lift up your horns. Do not lift your horns against heaven. Do not speak out with your outstretched neck. No one from the east or the west or from the desert can exalt man, but it is God who judges. He brings one down and exalts another. In the hand of the Lord is a cup, full of foaming wine mixed with spices. He pours it out. All the wicked of the earth drink it down to its very dregs. As for me, I will declare this forever. I will sing praises to God of Jacob. I will cut off the horns of all the wicked, but the horns of the righteous will be lifted up. Here ends the reading. We give thanks to God, for God is good. He looks kindly upon those who walk with him in righteousness. But those who stick out their necks, who are wicked, they have to be careful. It says, I will cut off the horns of all the wicked. I don't think he physically means that they have horns, but you wonder whether they have the same idea of the devil having horns as well. Interesting concept here. Anyways, but what we do know is that it's not good to be arrogant, and that it's not good to get drunk and exalt ourselves above God. So there's a good warning in there and good praise. We hear also about this cleansing for the infectious skin disease. Very interesting. We hear about scapegoats in many parts in Scripture, but what we don't hear about often is these birds being used as somewhat kind of like a scapegoat, in the sense that they kill for this. If somebody's cleansed, it says that they kill either the lamb, or if the person is poor, they sacrifice a dove or a pigeon, and then take the other pigeon and put it in the blood of the other one, and then release it. So it's kind of seems very similar to what we see with the scapegoat, where they would put the sins of the people upon the goat and then kick it out into the desert. They put the symbols of this infectious disease upon the dove and release it into the wild. So very interesting. You don't hear too much about this sort of thing. And lastly, we hear about what do you do with servants? So this is talking about servants that probably poor people who don't have the money to afford anything, and who service themselves out to another Jewish person. And so it says ritualistically, you're only supposed to keep them for 6 years. And on the 7th year, which is known as the year of releasing, that they would be let go. Now, there's also a thing where after 7 rounds of 7 years, there's also a release of what was called the Jubilee, where all people would be that were enslaved would be released, Jewish or non-Jewish, and that this would be a great celebration at that time. But this is talking just about the Hebrew people, and there's difference between whether it's a maidservant or a manservant. Manservant's 7 years. Maidservant, we don't hear how long it will be for them to be redeemed. We'll hear about that at some other time, though. And then we hear about what happens in personal injury. This is where our laws in most Judeo-Christian nations come from when it comes to, and it's based upon intention. You see here very clearly, it's what is the intention of the person. If they killed them accidentally or out of passion, we call that. So in our laws we call it manslaughter. Here they just say if they've intentionally done it or not. So And so those who would be deemed with manslaughter, like would be not intentionally do it, are allowed to run off and to find a place of sanctuary. And this is where later we'll hear about sanctuary cities. And then there's all these different nuances about, if a man hits a manservant and he takes out his eye or his tooth, or what happens if a bull gores somebody, but what happens if he's known, he intentionally knows about it and then he doesn't do anything about it, and there's harsher consequences for that. So a lot of these laws have to do with the intentionality of things. It's very interesting, the detail that is gone into here, but I mean, for good reason. Intention matters. The intentions of the heart very much matter. And so, as we go into further reading, let us be intentional about how we deal with our neighbors and how we deal with God. And may your intentions be one that are pure of heart and that you come before God in humility. I ask today that you might intentionally pray for me as I intentionally pray for you, that you might, as you learn and understand, you might grow in the fear and wisdom of the Lord. Have a blessed day. Bye.